The house was unusually quiet that afternoon, almost eerily so, and Emily Parker felt it in every corner as she moved from room to room, her steps soft against the wooden floor. She had been home alone for hours, trying to distract herself with small tasks, watering the plants, folding laundry, making a cup of tea she barely drank, but the silence was stubborn, pressing in on her like a weight she couldn't shake. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, a gentle rhythm that seemed to echo the emptiness she felt inside, and for a moment she let herself imagine what it would be like if someone walked in unexpectedly, if the quiet was broken by a familiar voice or a familiar face. Her thoughts drifted to Daniel, her son, who was supposed to be at college, at least 2 states away, living a life she rarely got to see, and she realized how much she missed him without fully admitting it even to herself. She could almost hear the sound of him running down the stairs, the way he always did when he was excited about something, and the image of him smiling filled her with both warmth and a dull ache. The clock ticked too loudly in the empty house, each second reminding her that she was alone, yet something deep inside told her that this moment, this quiet, was about to end. As she walked to the kitchen window to look at the gray sky outside, she wrapped her hands around the warm mug in her fingers, hoping the heat would settle the restless thoughts racing in her mind. Just as she took a tentative sip, she heard it, the soft click of the front door unlocking, followed by a step, and then a voice that made her heart stop. "Mom?" It was slow and deliberate, yet hesitant, carrying a mixture of surprise and something unspoken, and Emily's mind froze, her chest tightening, unable to process immediately what she had just heard. She stood there, gripping the mug so tightly it threatened to burn her hands, trying to convince herself it couldn't be him, that Daniel was hundreds of miles away and could not possibly be standing in her hallway. Yet when she finally turned, there he was, soaked from the rain, his hair damp and sticking slightly to his forehead, eyes wide and searching, looking at her in a way she hadn't seen since he was a boy. Time seemed to slow, each heartbeat echoing in her ears as she tried to take in the sight of him, taller now, broader in shoulders, a young man shaped by life and distance, yet still her son. He shifted slightly, carrying a backpack that seemed heavier than it should be, the strap digging into his shoulder, and she noticed the subtle tension in his posture, the kind that spoke of exhaustion, of worry, and perhaps of longing for a place that had always been home. Emily wanted to rush to him, to pull him into a hug and never let go, but for a moment, she stayed frozen, caught between disbelief and joy, unsure if she was allowed to show the depth of what she felt after so many months of absence. The rain outside continued to fall, streaking the glass in shimmering lines, and the room felt smaller, filled suddenly with emotion she hadn't expected to face, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for her next move. Daniel stepped forward, hesitant yet deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers, and she could see the mix of relief and uncertainty in them, the question he hadn't spoken yet, the silent hope that everything could still be okay despite the miles and the months that had passed. She felt a lump in her throat, words trapped behind it, the emotions of missing him, worrying about him, loving him all tangled together in a way that made her feel both young and old at the same time. Memories of his childhood flooded her mind, the scraped knees she had bandaged, the nights she had stayed awake waiting for him to come home, the laughter and the arguments and the small victories that had marked his growing years, and suddenly she realized how much the house had changed without him, and how much she had changed trying to fill the silence he left behind. Yet despite all the absence, there he was, alive, real, and right in front of her, a reminder that life had continued, yes, but that the bonds they shared had not weakened. She finally moved toward him, her steps quickening as tears pricked at her eyes, but he mirrored her motion, closing the distance between them with careful swiftness, and when they embraced, it was both familiar and startling, as though they were rediscovering each other after a long, uncertain journey. The warmth of him, the steady weight of his arms, the softness of his voice when he murmured "Mom, I'm home" all collided in her chest, overwhelming and tender, filling the empty spaces in the house and in her heart. Yet even in that perfect, fleeting moment of reunion, Emily sensed the story was far from over, that the surprise she had just experienced was only the beginning, and that the quiet she had learned to live with might now give way to challenges, confessions, and emotions she could not yet predict. She pulled back slightly to look at him, searching his eyes for some hint of why he had returned, and all she found was a mixture of fatigue, longing, and something unspoken, a question hovering in the space between them that neither had yet voiced. Daniel's wet jacket dripped onto the floor, unnoticed, as he studied her face, as if trying to memorize it after months apart, and Emily realized that the house, the rain, the quiet, the moments of emptiness, all of it had led to this one instant, this collision of past and present, mother and son, and the delicate, fragile joy of being together again. She wanted to talk, to ask why he had come, to scold him for worrying her, to cry, to laugh, to freeze time so this moment would never end, but all she could do was hold on to him, feel the reality of him, and let the emotions wash through her in waves she hadn't felt in months. The rain fell harder now, tapping a steady rhythm on the roof, a reminder that the world outside still existed, but inside, the house was alive again, humming with the energy of their reunion, a spark of something neither of them could yet name. And in that spark, Emily felt a trembling anticipation, the kind that comes before everything changes, before confessions, before the heart stretches and bends in ways it never imagined, because the son she thought she had lost to distance had walked in unexpectedly, and with him came a tide of hope, uncertainty, and love that refused to be ignored. She finally whispered his name, Daniel, and the sound carried through the hallway, mingling with the rain and the quiet, a gentle signal that life had shifted, that nothing would ever be quite the same again, and that the story of this home, of her heart, and of their connection had only just begun. Daniel had not meant to return home so suddenly, a cancelled semester, a string of disappointments, and nights spent staring at the ceiling had left him restless, aching for the comfort of familiarity, and yet when he arrived, the sight of his mother waiting in the hallway caught him off guard, making him hesitate for a moment as he tried to steady his racing heart. Emily could see it in his eyes, the exhaustion of too many responsibilities, the weight of trying to prove himself, and the vulnerability he usually hid behind sarcasm or a quick smile, and she wanted to bridge the distance immediately, to soothe all the invisible burdens he carried, but she also knew she had to let him find his own way back, one step at a time. They moved to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faint scent of rain, and she offered him a plate of food, though neither of them spoke much at first. The air between them was heavy with words unsaid, glances that lingered too long, and the quiet realization that time had changed them both. Daniel began to talk about his semester, the classes he had dropped, the friends he missed, and the loneliness he felt in a dormitory where he had thought he would belong, and Emily listened, nodding, asking the occasional gentle question, letting him pour out the frustration and confusion he had been carrying silently for months. His voice trembled slightly when he admitted how hard it had been to keep up appearances, how he pretended to be okay when he felt lost, and Emily felt a familiar ache in her chest, the ache of being a parent who had to watch her child struggle from afar, helpless yet fiercely protective, wishing she could fix everything with a single hug or a word. They shared small laughs when he recounted awkward dorm moments, misplaced assignments, and embarrassing encounters, but each laugh was underscored by the deeper thread of longing, for family, for home, for stability, and Emily realized how much he had grown, how much he had endured, and how fragile yet resilient he truly was. As dinner ended and the rain lightened outside, Daniel carried his backpack toward his old room, and Emily followed slowly, noting the careful way he walked, as though he was trying to step into memories without disturbing them, and she felt a mix of pride and sorrow, recognizing that her little boy was no longer little, that her guidance would now be gentle advice rather than constant presence. Then, just as he paused in the doorway, Daniel turned toward her, his expression soft but serious, and asked the question that pierced through all the layers of conversation and politeness they had maintained, "Mom, are you happy?" The words hung in the air like fragile glass, and Emily froze, realizing that for the first time in years, someone she loved deeply was asking her to confront her own life, her own choices, and her own heart, and she felt a rush of emotions, fear, longing, guilt, and a faint spark of hope, all mingling at once. She opened her mouth, ready to answer, but the doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting through the tension like a sudden gust of wind, and both of them turned instinctively, a momentary startle passing between them as they realized the quiet afternoon had been broken by another presence, someone neither had anticipated. Standing at the door was Mark Reynolds, a man Emily had known for years, whose friendship had grown quietly into something warmer and deeper, a gentle companion in the evenings when loneliness threatened to consume her, and seeing him there, smiling under the rain, made Daniel's eyes widen slightly, a mixture of curiosity and confusion reflecting in them. Emily felt her chest tighten, realizing she had not yet explained this part of her life, this chapter of her heart, and she wondered if Daniel would understand, if he would accept that his mother could find happiness outside of their family bond without it diminishing the love she had for him. Mark stepped inside, shaking off the rain and greeting both mother and son with his familiar warmth, and conversation began cautiously, polite at first, then slowly opening into deeper topics, revealing the trust and affection that had built over years of shared experiences, long talks, and quiet support, the kind of connection that neither distance nor time could erase. Daniel listened, trying to process the subtle hints of closeness between them, the way his mother's eyes softened, the slight tremor in her voice when she spoke to Mark, and yet he didn't interrupt, choosing instead to observe, to understand, to reconcile the image of his mother he had carried in his mind with the reality of her life now. Later, when Mark left, the house fell silent again, but the energy between mother and son had shifted. They sat together on the couch, the comfort of familiarity mixing with the awareness of change, and Daniel finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't know you were seeing someone." Emily took a deep breath, sitting closer to him, explaining gently how life had moved forward, how loneliness could be softened by companionship, and how her love for him remained constant, unwavering, even as her heart found room to care for someone else. Daniel nodded slowly, his mind tracing through months of absence, worries, and the longing he had carried, and he said, with surprising maturity, "I just want you to be okay," his voice soft but full of understanding, the kind of insight that made Emily's eyes water despite her efforts to remain composed. They talked for hours after that, sharing thoughts about life, love, mistakes, and forgiveness, discovering new layers in their relationship, recognizing that their bond could expand to accommodate change rather than be threatened by it, and Emily realized that Daniel's return had brought not only relief but also clarity, a chance to rebuild, reconnect, and nurture both her own happiness and his trust. She noticed subtle details, the way he smiled when she teased him gently, the way he listened without judgment, the small gestures that signaled respect and love, and she felt a renewed sense of hope, that home could once again be a place of warmth, laughter, and healing. Outside, the rain softened, streaks of sunlight beginning to filter through gray clouds, casting a gentle glow across the living room, and Emily and Daniel sat together, feeling the quiet shift, feeling the heartache of months melt away, and yet sensing that their story was far from over, that surprises and challenges still awaited, and that the moment of reunion, as joyful and tender as it was only the beginning of a deeper journey into understanding, love, and the delicate balance of family and new beginnings. And as night fell, with the house finally calm, Emily realized that happiness was not a single moment or a single choice, it was the courage to allow it to enter, to embrace it despite uncertainties, and to share it with those who mattered most, even if it meant stepping into unfamiliar territory together, mother and son, learning how to live, how to love, and how to accept the changes life had unexpectedly brought into their world. The following evening, Emily was still feeling the warmth of Daniel's return when the doorbell rang again, a familiar chime that made her heart skip in a different way, and she opened it to see Mark Reynolds standing there, slightly damp from the drizzle, carrying the calm, reassuring smile that had slowly become a part of her life over the past months, a presence that was comforting, gentle, and quietly romantic in the way he always seemed to understand her without words. Daniel, who had been in the hallway, froze the moment he saw him, his eyes widening with surprise and curiosity, and Emily could sense the subtle shift in the air as son and mother and friend, navigated this unexpected convergence of emotions. Mark greeted Daniel politely, his tone friendly but careful, and Emily felt the weight of the moment pressing on her as she realized how delicate this situation was, her son witnessing a part of her life she hadn't fully explained yet, a side of her heart that had learned to hope and trust again. They all stepped inside, shaking off the drizzle and closing the door, and the room filled with a quiet energy, an unspoken acknowledgement that things were different now, that time had brought change, and that love, in its many forms, could coexist with family ties if approached with care and honesty. Conversation began cautiously, small talk about the weather, about work, about trivial events, but gradually it deepened as Mark's warmth drew Daniel in, and Emily watched with a mix of pride and apprehension as her son tried to reconcile the image of the mother he had known with the woman she had become, a woman capable of feeling, longing, and even finding companionship outside of their bond. Daniel asked questions, careful, measured, seeking to understand without judgment, and Emily answered honestly, explaining her friendship with Mark, how it had grown naturally from trust, mutual respect, and shared experiences, how her heart had learned to open slowly, and how loving someone didn't mean loving her son any less. Mark contributed gently, sharing light anecdotes, his easy laughter filling the space, breaking tension, and making Daniel realize that this man wasn't intruding but was part of the life his mother had carefully built in moments when he wasn't there to witness it, a companion who offered stability, understanding, and joy. Emily noticed Daniel studying Mark's expressions, observing the subtle gestures, the way he listened attentively, the way he glanced at her with tenderness, the calm presence he carried into the room, and she understood that this moment was as much for Daniel as it was for her, a chance for them to see that life could expand, that love could grow, and that family ties could remain strong even as new relationships formed. Later, after Mark had said his goodbyes and left, Emily and Daniel returned to the living room, the quiet settling again, heavier now with reflection, and Daniel finally spoke, his voice steady but soft. "I didn't know you were seeing someone," a mixture of surprise, acceptance, and the gentle curiosity of someone trying to understand how a parent's heart could hold more than one kind of love. Emily took a deep breath, sitting beside him, feeling both nervous and relieved as she explained that her loneliness had led her to open her heart again, that she had discovered happiness didn't always come in the form one expects, and that her love for him had never wavered, that he would always be her son, her priority, her family, even as she allowed herself to care for another. Daniel nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, a sign that he understood more than he let on, and he whispered almost to himself, "I just want you to be okay," words that carried the weight of maturity, empathy, and the deep bond that had weathered distance, time, and uncertainty. They stayed there, talking for hours, exploring emotions, boundaries, fears, and hopes, discussing how relationships could be layered without diminishing one another, learning how to communicate openly and honestly, and realizing that trust was the foundation of both family and love, and that understanding each other's choices could strengthen their connection rather than weaken it. Emily watched Daniel closely, noticing the way he softened when she smiled, the way he listened without judgment, the subtle gestures of affection he still showed after all these years, and she felt her heart swell with relief and pride, knowing that despite the surprises and complexities of life, their relationship had survived, evolved, and grown even deeper. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a faint mist in the air, the world calm and reflective, and inside, the Parker home was alive with quiet energy, filled with laughter, understanding, and the delicate tension of hearts learning to coexist, to accept change, and to embrace the possibilities of new beginnings. Emily realized that happiness wasn't a destination, but a process, a series of choices to let people in, to trust, to communicate, and to love without fear, and in that moment, sitting with her son and feeling the echo of Mark's presence lingering in the warmth of the room, she understood that life could be tender, unpredictable, and beautiful all at once. Daniel, too, felt a shift within himself, seeing his mother not just as a caregiver but as a woman capable of desire, joy, and renewal, and he understood that his own path could now include acceptance of the changes in her life, that he could be both protective and supportive without trying to control, that love for a parent could coexist with respect for their choices. As the night deepened, Emily and Daniel sat quietly, the room bathed in soft lamplight, their hearts full of unspoken words, shared understanding, and the fragile hope that everything could find balance. And even though questions still lingered, about the future, about feelings, about how to navigate the intertwining of family and new love, both mother and son felt a sense of relief, a gentle reassurance that life had room for surprises, for healing, and for growth, that the bonds they shared could withstand change, and that together, they could embrace the unknown with courage, patience, and love. The evening ended not with resolutions but with a soft, unspoken promise, that no matter how life unfolded, they would face it side by side, hearts open, ready to discover the depths of connection, understanding, and affection that had brought them together again, stronger and wiser, aware that sometimes the most unexpected visitors, whether rain-soaked friends or returning sons, could teach the most profound lessons about love, trust, and the beautiful complexity of family life. In the days and weeks that followed Daniel's unexpected return, the Parker house slowly regained its rhythm, a gentle hum of life that had been missing for months, and Emily felt a new energy in the walls, in the rooms, in the way sunlight filtered through the windows, a quiet reminder that change, though sometimes unsettling, could bring warmth and hope. Daniel settled back into his old room with a sense of ease, unpacking his things, arranging books and personal items just as he remembered, yet there was a subtle difference in the air. They both sensed that home had shifted, that the absence had taught them how to value presence, and that this reunion was more than just a physical return, it was an emotional reconnection, a moment to repair, strengthen, and rediscover the bonds that distance had tested. Emily allowed herself to feel fully seen again, not just as a mother, but as a woman with hopes, dreams, and a heart that could still open to love, and when Mark returned, this time invited freely and without hesitation, the atmosphere was warm, relaxed, and filled with laughter, small gestures of affection, and quiet conversations that spoke of trust and familiarity. Daniel observed them, curious but calm, noting the ease in his mother's smile, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke to Mark, the subtle touches and glances that conveyed care without words, and he realized that love could exist in many forms at once, that happiness for his mother did not threaten his place in her heart, and that life could expand without erasing what had come before. The family and friends navigated this new chapter delicately, learning how to balance old routines with new connections, how to honor history while embracing the present, and how to communicate openly about feelings, fears, and desires in ways that strengthened bonds rather than strained them. Emily felt her heart swell with gratitude as she watched Daniel laugh again, not just at casual jokes, but with the genuine joy of someone who had been longing for the comfort and safety of home, and she realized that his presence had healed a part of her too, that the act of caring for him, of seeing him mature and understand, had rekindled a spark of hope she thought had dimmed with the passing of lonely months. Even small moments became significant, a shared cup of tea, a joke about his old high school antics, the way he helped with chores without complaint, each gesture a thread weaving them closer, building trust, understanding, and affection anew, reminding Emily that family was a living, breathing thing, shaped by care, presence, and love. As spring light filled the rooms, washing the walls in a soft glow, Emily began to see that happiness was not a singular event or achievement but a series of moments, small and large, chosen and accepted, and that allowing herself to feel, to laugh, to hope, and to love did not take away from her role as a mother but enhanced it, making her stronger, more present, and more resilient. Daniel, too, learned to appreciate the subtle changes in his mother's life, noticing how she balanced warmth and independence, how she allowed herself joy without guilt, and how her heart had room for both him and the man she cared for, and he found a sense of relief in this understanding, a reassurance that family could be a source of comfort and inspiration, not restriction. Mark's presence became a gentle rhythm in their lives, a reminder that love could be tender, respectful, and supportive, that it could coexist with deep family bonds, and that life's surprises, unexpected returns, delayed confessions, and second chances, could teach lessons about patience, empathy, and embracing the unknown. Emily, Daniel, and Mark shared meals, stories, and quiet evenings together, learning the delicate dance of personal space, connection, and emotional honesty, discovering that laughter could coexist with tears, that understanding could overcome fear, and that the heart could stretch in ways one never imagined, accommodating new love while honoring old bonds. Over time, Emily noticed subtle transformations within herself, confidence in expressing feelings, courage to embrace new beginnings, and the ability to accept that life would not be perfectly predictable but could still be deeply fulfilling, and she saw the same growth in Daniel, whose maturity and empathy had blossomed during his unexpected time at home, his observations of her life, and his own reflections on his path forward. Nights became filled with quiet conversation, plans for the future, and gentle moments of connection, each one layering trust, joy, and understanding into their relationships, and Emily realized that the most meaningful happiness came from these small, consistent actions, from being present, and from embracing vulnerability without fear. Daniel sometimes lingered in the doorway when she and Mark spoke softly, listening not out of intrusion but out of curiosity and growing acceptance, learning that love could be shared and experienced in many ways, that caring for one person did not preclude caring for another, and that the bonds between parent and child were strengthened, not weakened, by trust and honesty. Emily felt a profound sense of peace as she watched him interact, witnessing the balance of respect, affection, and newfound maturity, and she knew that their relationship had evolved into something deeper, richer, and more resilient, capable of withstanding the unexpected, celebrating the joyful, and navigating the emotional landscapes that life inevitably presented. Even ordinary days, folding laundry together, preparing meals, sharing news from the outside world, became filled with meaning, a reminder that love was expressed not only in grand gestures but in consistent presence, in gentle attentiveness, and in the courage to face uncertainty with an open heart. As the weeks passed, the Parker household became a place of warmth, laughter, and tender understanding, a sanctuary where past hurts could be acknowledged, present joys could be savored, and future hopes could take root, all while maintaining the delicate balance between independence, connection, and emotional honesty. Emily often found herself pausing to reflect on how far they had come. The quiet house that once felt empty now thrummed with life, love, and possibility, her son learning to navigate the complexities of growing up, herself learning to embrace happiness fully, and Mark becoming a steady presence that complemented rather than complicated their lives. One evening, Emily stood by the window, looking out at the soft glow of sunset, and realized that the greatest surprises in life weren't always dramatic or sudden, they were quiet, unfolding in the everyday moments of laughter, trust, support, and love, teaching that family and romance could coexist, hearts could heal, and happiness could be chosen and nurtured day by day. Daniel watched her from across the room, a small smile on his face, understanding without words that his mother's joy did not diminish his place in her life, that love could be layered and expansive, and that home had grown into a space where everyone could thrive together. Emily turned to him, their eyes meeting, and in that silent exchange, they both recognized the unspoken truth. The house, once quiet and empty, had been transformed by return, honesty, and love, becoming a haven not just for comfort but for growth, acceptance, and shared happiness. And as the night settled over the Parker home, the soft lamplight illuminating their smiles, Emily knew that life had given them a rare gift, a chance to rebuild, to embrace love in all its forms, and to step into the future with hearts open, ready to face whatever surprises awaited, confident that together, mother, son, and friend could navigate the path ahead with tenderness, understanding, and an enduring sense of joy.